And we're at 1, so I'll go ahead and kickstart us if that's everybody's good with that. So first of all, thank you all very, very much for taking the time to do this. We are very excited to talk about what we truly believe is the best kept secret in college sports. Well, soon to not be. So I'm going to pull up our presentation here, 2 seconds. Yeah, sorry, they can't care of. Okay. And then we'll kick this off. Panelists, you guys see my screen? You see my presentation?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay, perfect. So today, the folks you'll be hearing from, hopefully not very much from me, more from these 3 guys. John Currie, most of you probably already know, Director of Athletics, Wake Forest University. Kim McDaniel, President, Walter Robbs Architects. And then Jeremy Williams, Executive Creative Director at DI. All these folks have been heavily involved with all facility work at Wake Forest over varying amounts of time, but we're excited to finally get to talk about this. So here's what we'll cover today. First, we'll give you a little overview on our firms, or our companies, or our organizations. And then we'll dig into truly kind of what this is about, right? All that's happened at Wake Forest over the years. We'll have John give a little overview and Ken Jeremy give some insight. So guys, if you don't mind, I'll let you talk about your own organizations as opposed to me doing that part. So John, first we have Wake Forest, if you don't mind.
Drew, thank you very much for having us. I sit here representing a whole bunch of people and a lot of leaders at Wake Forest, like Ron Wellman and even Dr. Gene Hooks, who have built a pretty incredible legacy here. And then you see up in the corner our president, Dr. Susan Wente, who's been here for a year. I tell her in about 11 months, she's served about 17 years because there's been so much going on, and we continue to charge forward with our latest project.
Awesome. Ken, tell us a little bit about your firm.
Sure. Walter Robbs Architects, we've been in business since 1965. Wide range of experience from higher ed, K through 12, and athletics. We've done a number of projects on campus, not just athletics. We've done classroom buildings, residence halls, a wide range of projects. We've worked on every athletics project at Wake Forest for 28 years. So it's been a really great relationship, and has put us in a position to know the department really well.
Were you 12 when you started?
No, almost.
Jeremy, you want to give us the DI overview?
Sure. Yeah, we are an experienced design firm. We do a lot of work in collegiate sports. We are design and build, and so we fabricate everything that we design, including not only just aluminum and signage and graphics work, but also technology as well.
Fantastic. Now, let's get into the meat of this. And really, right, John, it's about, what exactly are we talking about? So let's start with kind of an overview here so people can have perspective on your campus and your areas, your spaces. And I'm going to flip back and forth between these slides because I think it gives good perspective for you. So this is kind of your campus map that highlights those areas so they know what is Wake Forest. And then I'll jump back here to the satellite. But if you don't mind, John, give us a kind of 30,000 foot overview of all that's gone on and kind of where it begins when it comes to this run of facility work that you've been doing at Wake Forest.
Right. Well, thank you very much, Drew. As I mentioned before, the person that should be sitting here giving this webinar is actually Ron Wellman, who is our athletics director for 27 years, who retired in 2019. And so I pick up the rope in March of 2019, and Wake Forest had done some extraordinary projects under Ron's leadership. It really goes back, the project we're going to talk the most about today, to 2006, when Wake Forest won the ACC football championship, beat Georgia Tech down in the old Gator Bowl 9-6 to win the championship and played in the Orange Bowl. That was the first time a Big Four school, Duke, North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and NC State, and Wake Forest. That's the Big Four for those of us who aren't from the North State. The Big Four, Wake Forest was the first Big Four school to win an ACC football championship in 17 years, and continues to be the only one in the last 40 years to win the ACC football championship. And after that championship, there was a flurry of activity for Wake Forest athletics, including the construction of what is now McCurry Tower at what is now Truist Field. So in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, you see Truist Field, which is our football stadium. And then to the immediate southwest of that, you see the roof of Joel Coliseum, which Wake Forest bought from the city of Winston-Salem around 2014. So fast forward to 2012-13, the momentum had really run down a little bit for Wake Forest football. And under Coach Grove's leadership and Ron and Bob McCrary, one of our incredible longtime, a former player here who literally came to Wake Forest from a rural shack with no plumbing in Western North Carolina a long time ago to play football here, and went on to a great business career and continues to be a great supporter. Started to look at how to reinvigorate our football program specifically, and started a process with Ken to assess those facilities over a long-term period of time. That led into, there was a coaching transition. We hired Dave Clausen, who started in the December of 2013 into 2014, the development of what became McCrary Fieldhouse, which I know we'll talk about, and a number of other different facilities. And then you get ahead to 2019 as we open McCrary Fieldhouse, Shaw Basketball Complex, and then the last couple of years we've added the McCrary Football Complex to our project list. My focus in 2019 was really to narrow in on completing the campus quadrant, if you will. The facilities our student athletes use every single day. And one of the great advantages we have at Wake Forest is that our facilities are beachfront property, if you will. They are right next to the main area of campus. Our student athletes live, work, and play all in the same places. And we really believe now, thanks to the teamwork of all these folks here and the leadership and the example of Bob McCrary and Ben Sutton and Mitch Shaw and lots of other folks, we believe we have as good of an on-campus athletic facility complex as anybody in the country.
Yeah, here's another view of those spaces you talked about. And that leads pretty nicely into Ken, kind of your role where you began. John mentioned it, right? You've been engaged with this for a very long time. So will you give us a sense of kind of, where you start and kind of where that leads and how that gets us to where we are today?
Sure. So in 1997, when I came to work with Walter Robbs, one of the first projects I worked on was in the previous slide to the left, the Miller Center. And so that was a freestanding facility. And then fast forward to 2012, as John was mentioning, when we started to master plan the rest of these facilities, it started with a reassessment of the Miller Center to say, everything that we want to add to this thing, how can we reassess the Miller Center, get it where it needed to be code-wise so that we could build an unlimited amount of square footage here. And so that's what started the process, the master planning of all that and what the pieces were going to be. And so, that was around 2012, 2013 as we were master planning everything you see on the screen kind of to the right of the Miller Center and then the fields that are in the foreground. And so we really master planned that, believing that Sutton Sports Performance Center would be the first project. And so we had all of this master planned, all of these pieces. And then in April of 2014, we took a field trip to do some benchmarking on indoor facilities, kind of turned on a dime, and 90 days later decided that McCurry Fieldhouse would actually be the first thing that was going to be constructed. And so, that was the first real sprint to go from concept to a set of construction document in 90 days based on a benchmarking trip. But at the time, there was a lot of factors to that and trying to create something, for all of the athletes.
And let me just jump in here, David, because as usual, Ken is underselling his extraordinary role and the vision through the years and also the innovation. So if you look at the Miller Center in the upper left-hand corner, which Ken mentioned starting the design process there, the Miller Center was opened around 2000 as one of the, not the first, but among the first standalone basketball practice facilities and academic services units. And so again, Ron Wellman, quite visionary in developing that facility with the lead gift from Ken Miller back then. And so that the student athlete, the primacy of student athlete has always been our first priority at Wake Forest. And you saw in our core goals, student athlete experience is still first. And so as you look at what Ken was talking about a second ago, as they assessed in the spring of 2014, the highest priority for our football coach Dave Clawson, who's done an incredible job of building the most successful football program in the state. One of the program that has won more games than any other in the ACC over the last 5 years, excluding the COVID year, except for Clemson. But he really looked at the field house as being the facility that would affect our student athletes the most on a day-to-day basis and enable our student athletes to have the most positive impact on a day-to-day basis. And very significantly, a facility that others in the athletics family would benefit from. Other sports could use the field house as well, rather than just going and building a bunch of coaches' offices first.
And it should be noted too that there's not a lot of places in college athletics that have the connectivity right of these buildings. But I can't name another place that the buildings are truly disconnected, which makes it pretty spectacular and a heck of a planning effort on your part, Ken, as well.
And then Ken have to work with some pretty high standards of design. These are, because they are proximate to campus.
Yeah.
We're not going to build a metal shell building somewhere. We've got a lot of brick and great decor. And in fact, when Coach Clawson came here, Wake Forest had just built a brand new state-of-the-art business school, Farrell Hall, and he actually used for the first couple of years, football used Farrell Hall for the recruiting weekends to show prospective football athletes what our football facilities would be someday as world-class as our academic facilities.
Yeah, and what you don't see in this slide is it's kind of the what's next. I mean, when John came here in 2019, he immediately challenged us with the football locker room. And so on the east side, just opposite of this picture of McCurry Fieldhouse, the athletes will now have an indoor training facility that's connected to their locker room. So that's under construction currently.
Yeah. And so, Ken, when did you decide? Well, Ken and John, when was it that, hey, we need to look at a partner like DI? When did that kind of come to the forefront for you?
So, I think John had a relationship from 2011 at K-State, and then of course DI had already done some work for Wake Forest. It was not long after the master planning and probably in that 90-day period where we were drawing McCurry Fieldhouse that we realized pretty quickly that, the student athlete experience, the recruit walk, all these things that the coaches are talking about, we need to get, a brand strategy alignment pretty quickly. And so DI came on board very early and that pattern has kind of continued through the rest of these projects. I mean, that earlier picture you had, there's probably a dozen individual projects, even though there's 3 primary pieces, but there's a lot of projects in that picture.
So, Jeremy, that leads to you. I know it's unique to have, let's call it a branding firm, if you will, to be this engaged with a client for this long. So when do you come into this process, and kind of what were your initial steps and initial projects?
Yeah, very, very early on. It was probably 2013, 2014, when they were visiting other campuses, when they were talking about a master plan, and there was talk of this vision. They actually found us online through some of our other projects and reached out, and we came down. And our immediate thing was to just hear the vision, hear the plan, and the goal being to do multiple facilities, but to also look at the brand strategy throughout those multiple facilities, so that they could have some consistency across all of them. And so we did some auditing right off the bat, looking at programs and facilities, evaluating the recruiting path, getting into current athletic spaces. We did some initial interior branding, and that got woven into the master plan as well, so that they can have that consistent brand look across all of these new facilities.
Very nice. So let's talk about these facilities. Dig into that further. First of all, right, at any given time, you've got, I don't know, 2, 3, if not 4 facilities running at once, right? So it's kind of a question for all of you. And maybe we start with you, John. How is each organization managing that effort, or have you managed that effort? All of these moving parts, at one time.
Sure. So we're really fortunate here. We have a very close relationship with our campus planning group. John Chanette is our vice president and provides great leadership, and we've got a great team working in conjunction with Craig Zakaruski, who's our associate AD for facilities. I should also mention that Steve Adams, who continues to work in the campus planning office here, was in the athletics program at the time. All this stuff was started and did an incredible job of bringing these projects, Sutton Sports Performance Center, McCurry Fieldhouse, to completion a number of years ago. So it's a real collaborative effort. My personal philosophy is that as an athletics director, in addition to communicating with all of our constituencies and working with our head coaches, driving revenue and driving our projects and moving our projects along is a really critical part of my responsibilities. The time is money thing happens, right? And in a bureaucratic environment, like sometimes higher education can be, it's real easy for projects and or decision components of projects, organization of projects, et cetera, to just get pushed down the road. And before you know it, you're missing your deadlines and things are moving on down. The other thing that I've experienced, and as was mentioned earlier, although the DI relationship with Wake Forest started, 6 years before I came back to Wake Forest in 2019, we had built a relationship with DI when I was at Kansas State when we were doing that master plan overview and transformation of that campus, starting in 2009 through the time I departed. And then my successor, Gene Taylor, has done an extraordinary job of continuing it there. And so I had a pretty good idea of kind of what DI does and how the finishes and all that kind of stuff fit into the overall project.
Ken and Jeremy, anything else you guys want to add related to, again, multiple projects at once, really, right? At any given time this year, we've had three projects running. I don't know if you had any comments on that or how you've been able to manage that or, how you can manage it.
Yeah, I think it's having a consistent team. I think that Ken and I have been on all of these projects together and have worked on built a relationship working on all these projects together. And then our teams individually, I have several designers that have had hands involved in all of these projects. And so that consistent team effort, I think, really helps with the quality and with the effort, with the time that it takes to do these.
Yeah, and again, I think what's been nice about these images that are on the screen now, like you said, a lot of these were going concurrently. And so, you never had to figure out who you're reaching out to. If there was something that came up on golf that you wanted to try to use at baseball or vice versa, we're doing multiple sports at one time and trying to serve all the student athletes. So at the end of the day, we're trying to make the experience for all student athletes as the best it can be. And so having that cohesion between us has been great.
Yeah. And I will say, we've had other partnerships. We have other, campus partnerships, athletic department partnerships. The one thing that is unique here is architect, and branding together the entire time, right? Usually one of those is often changing, which does, is to be expected, but does certainly change the efficiency of a process. So it's pretty cool to see. So obviously for these to happen, right? Donors play a pretty huge role, John. So will you tell us about the role of donors, and kind of how you've worked with them through these facility projects?
Well, you're really going back to the, my entire career. I saw you guys are 28 years, right? This is my 28th year, or just finishing 28 years in college athletics and 12 years as an AD. The engagement of donors in working with donors so they are part of developing the vision and developing the solutions to the challenges is really, really critical in my opinion. I know there's lots of different ways to do it, but the way I learned from Charlie Patterson and others was that we needed to get the donors involved. And when I say donors, you need to get the lead donors who can truly drive. And when I say drive, I mean drive with the lead gifts involved in the projects early on. I've always been taught that if you go to a donor and you say, hey, great news, here's our plan, will you participate? You're really not asking the donor to be a partner. You're just asking the donor for the money, right? So the greatest success we've had, whether it was Tennessee in the 2000s or Kansas State or here at Wake Forest, was getting donors early on and going and looking at other places with peers at other schools and we've helped them when they've come here, when they've come to the other places I've worked, to show donors, what a vision can be, to enable them to see what it can be. In a lot of ways, it's an institutional vision, but it's got to be donor driven from a funding standpoint, at least. We're at the places I've worked. So there's nothing better than when you have a donor that really believes in your program. Being on one of those planes with an architect or one of you guys and touring a campus. I can remember doing that with Jack Vanier or Bill Ryan at K-State or John Tickle or Haslam or whatever, Tennessee. And of course here with Bob McCrary and Ben Sutton and Mitch Shaw and that crew. And we were really fortunate at Wake Forest. And of course, this is before I was here, with Ben's knowledge of the national scene. And knowing the great places to go, that trip they took in 2014, that was really impactful to help shape what Wake Forest could be. And now looking ahead to this point, has us in this position.
And Ken, to that point, I think John mentioned it. So when you did your facility tours, when you guys looked at the other facilities out there, you had donors with you on those trips?
Yeah, so some of the benchmarking trips, yes, there was donors involved. And of course, between DI and Walter Robbs, we generated renderings and fly-throughs and a number of different things that were used to communicate to the donors. And like John was saying, I mean, from my perspective, Wake has been very fortunate to have donors that are not heavy-handed in what the facility has to be. But their feedback is great, and it really allowed us to. We've allowed to challenge ourselves amongst our team without it being, without the design being so much donor driven. But
yeah. And Jeremy, I know generally speaking, I take your ideas and then pretend like I know what I'm talking about and show them to donors is how we work. But right, generally speaking, a big part of your effort early on is that, right, in college sports is showcasing renderings for a donor. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Putting together kind of the vision of what it's going to be, what it could look like, presenting that, talking through the goals and the vision of the program with donors. And what's been great here at Wake Forest is the donors, they want this to be the best, and they want the quality. And so they constantly asking us, what does everybody else have? Is this better than everybody else? And they are pushing us to give them excellent facilities. And so that is really exciting.
Yeah, and I'll add to John's point, for anybody we've worked with, regardless of project budget, our most successful projects are when the donor is involved from sort of the get-go, without a doubt. So just worth noting. So more of the projects, more of this is really what's to come, right? This is what's happening right now. I can flip through these and really I can let you all kind of speak to them, but these are really opening this year. This is what's in the hopper. And so we'll start with the men's basketball side. Jeremy, Ken, I don't know, or you all can tell me, but if you want to give some overview on this.
Yeah, I can talk through these a little bit. So this is our men's basketball. We have some renovations going on, office facility, but also new locker room facility for practice locker rooms. That's on campus, and this view here is a corridor that's going to highlight NBA players. And so on the left, you have these gold basketballs that spin around and highlight all the different NBA teams, and will have the names of NBA players on them. And then the next slide, it gets into more of the new locker room renovation addition that's happening in Miller Center right now, where this is our locker room entrance and lounge facility for the players to be able to come and hang out during the day, in between practices. It's sort of their home space on campus. And then women's facility, similar, their locker room space, which is in the same building, and then their locker room here, you can see their locker room ceiling, with this sort of net of lighting and logo treatment, and then the sort of interior space. It's up on the second floor, third floor. They're going to have a view out looking over campus. It's going to be a really nice space for them.
Drew, flip back to the orientation shot, which shows the 4 facilities side by side. Of the Miller Center, Shaw Basketball Complex, and it's pretty far back there. That gives a little orientation here.
Yeah, it might be around slide 10 or so.
Yeah, a couple more here. There we go. All right, there we go. Stop right there. All right, very good. Actually, go to the one you got the arrow on. One more back. All right, so when you look at the number 1 on the board is the Miller Center, and then the Shaw Basketball Complex, Sutton Sports Performance Center, and number 4 is McCurry Football Fieldhouse. In a second, we'll talk about the McCurry Football Complex, which is just to the right of the 2 and the 4 on the back side of the McCurry Football Fieldhouse. And so go to the next slide, please. So when the Sutton Sports Performance Center was completed in 2019, originally the plan before I got here was to renovate the football locker room for our football student athletes in Manchester, which is actually the old Butler building in which we sit right now, and that is the building on the far left-hand corner of the screen. And as we assessed that, it was really not going to give us the finished product that we wanted, and it was not going to be in the right place. And so we went ahead with planning for what eventually became the McCurry Football Fieldhouse that we'll talk about in just a minute. Going back to the Miller Center, thanks to a wonderful lead gift from Chris Paul several years ago. It actually goes back to the fall of 2018 when Chris and his brother CJ and their parents, Robin and Charles, made this $2.5 million gift to create a men's basketball locker room space. And then Dr. Carol Guth, who is about 86 years old, a retired physician, who is actually not with us today because she's on a safari in Africa at age 86. She made the lead gift for the Carol Guth Women's Basketball Clubhouse. And so on the 3rd and 4th floor of that Miller Center, on the left-hand side, the women's clubhouse will be on the 3rd floor, and the men's clubhouse will be on the top floor. So our women's basketball program and our men's basketball program will have truly equal spaces from an equity standpoint, right next to their gymnasia, right next to their coaches' offices, right in the same building where our academic center will be renovated next year. So they really have it right all there together. Now you can go back forward to the slides you were about to show. And you get into the McCurry Football Complex. So COVID is affecting your click speed there, Drew.
I lost my career.
Yeah, so the McCurry Football Complex will end up being 60,000 square feet, football locker room, football lounge, hospitality, additional training room space, a full-scale football equipment room will actually benefit our campus because we'll move the loading area for the football truck, et cetera, off of a main campus thoroughfare, et cetera. And that will all be to the north of the existing McCurry Fieldhouse.
Yeah, with these projects being, so many of these projects have been additions to the things we just finished. And so even back to the locker room examples in the Miller Center, a lot of it's been about leveraging the assets that already existed, either for 20 years or for 1 year, depending on when the building was finished. And so I think the partnership with DI and Wake Forest has allowed us to try to leverage those assets, find ways to pull all that together, and be very strategic on where these things get placed. It was no accident that the basketball locker rooms happened where they did because of the assets that were close by.
Yep. Yeah, and Kent, it really is hard through these visuals, right, to represent the complexity of what you're talking about, right? It's worked out really, really well. It's been playing really well, but that was no easy task. So on here, then we have some of the finished projects. And I know this is, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, this is our first one, right?
Yeah, this was the first major project we did on campus. We had a couple small things, but the Haddock House. Back in 2014. Yeah.
So right. Ken, this is where we start. Yeah. And then I think we're also showing. Okay, my click speed is messed up apparently. I think we showed those already. So tell me again, John, what's still to come. Right, we have what we showed finishing this year. What academic center?
Yeah, so we've got the McCurrie Football Complex, which is a $38 million project, which will be the first project in the history of the university, which has been completed, including a long-term maintenance reserve fund. So we've included that in our fundraising, fully donor provided for, no long-term finance costs, et cetera. So we're very proud of that. The brand new men's and women's basketball clubhouses that we mentioned is about an $8 million total between those two projects. That is an incredible enhancement of that Miller Center facility rather than a renovation. There's really no renovating about it. It's a complete enhancement there. We'll then look forward as we kind of complete the campus quadrant. We've got some big projects to go looking at Joel Coliseum and all the land that's around our football stadium and our basketball arena, taking some cues from some of our colleagues around the country who've developed areas to really transform their communities.
Very good. Any other comments from Ken, Jeremy, you want to add? You're good.
Yeah, I think again, I mean, having everything under one roof, I mean, just leveraging all the different programs that have to intertwine together. And just like John was mentioning, our next project is going to be the second floor academic services. And so, you know, for years now, we've already been brainstorming about how do you acoustically separate it, an academic center that's in the middle of an athletic center where there might be weights being lifted or training going on. And so, you know, we've had those thoughts in our minds now for years as we proceeded with this master plan.
Yeah, I'd say for us, just the development of this long-term relationship and being able to be on campus for this long with this many projects has just been great for just efficiency, for communication, for just the quality of the work, to be able to just go from project to another, to maintain that consistency across all these facilities. It's just been a great working relationship and a great thing to be a part of.
For sure, yeah, and I have to say that, you know, thanks to, you know, John, Ken, Craig, Steve, Ron, that, you know, DI has gotten to do this, and we really, truly appreciate you guys giving us this opportunity to do it. It's been a pretty special relationship, to say the least. And Craig Z, I love you, best friends forever.
You know, we're fortunate, Drew. We've got we have the ability, once we establish a partnership like we have with Ken and his team, or with the DI team, we don't have to spend a lot of time. Now, we do continue to check prices, boys. We're still checking those, all right? We do. We know how to call people, all right? But once you have good partners, the time that you spend, that you would otherwise spend, you know, going through a process to fit some technicality or some rule, and, you know, granted, I've worked 19 years in state higher education too, so I get everywhere has their different advantages and challenges, but that is a huge advantage for us at Wake Forest. We have the ability to move nimbly. I would also say that the leadership of our presidents, we've had presidential stability here. Our new president, Susan Wente, follows Dr. Hatch, who hired me. He was a great president for almost 20 years, and Dr. Hearn before him for 20 years. So when you have stability like that, you have the ability to continue to move things forward without, you know, disruptive events, so to speak. And all of those things have worked in Wake Forest's favor.
John, to that point, on the flip side of that, you know, for companies like DI and Walter Robbs, the ability to forecast, right, when we know work that we truly, you know, is likely to occur, very likely to occur in a given amount of time, it also really helps us keep that continuity, right? I mean, that is how we plan and staff and all of those things. So, you know, it really helps both directions.
Oh, sure. I mean, you know, for a long time now, 90% of our workload has been repeat clients. And of course, one of the largest being Wake Forest. And so you're right, just trying to be a business owner, trying to run a business. I mean, it's phenomenal to be able to have a client like this that continues to have confidence in you.
I would share a couple of things about relationship, Drew, is that I've seen the mistakes made in different architects, and perhaps there's other firms watching this webinar, of an entity that's not used to building stuff, sitting down with architects and say, what do we need? right? And so certainly architects bring perspective, but they also have a responsibility to translate what we articulate as our needs into something that's buildable and constructible and works and meets code and all those kind of things. So it's really important on the owner side, if you will, on our side of the table, to put the time in to be prepared going in all those charrettes with ideas about what we want. I think it's really important for us to be inclusive with our coaches, be inclusive with our student athletes, to sense what they want and what's most important. And a good example of that is that process they went through in 2014, where Coach Clausen said what we needed the most. And that was what we needed the most, was that indoor field. And it was also the right element from a cost standpoint. That indoor field cost less than the Sutton Sports Performance Center, but it was transformative when it was built at Wake Forest, and it immediately elevated the belief of what could be delivered at Wake Forest, which from a donor perspective inspired donors that Wake Forest was doing stuff that it had never done before. And we've seen the same thing happen at other schools where you get your one kind of model project going, and maybe in this case it's also the Haddock House. Well, if we can do that for golf, why can't we do that for football? And you got David Couch Ballpark. Well, if we can do this for David Couch Ballpark, which has incredible locker rooms and is one of probably the best baseball player specific spaces in the country of any college campus, David Couch Ballpark. And so if we can do that for baseball, we ought to be able to do that for football, right? We ought to be able to do that for men's and women's basketball, which is really very important in the history and heritage of Wake Forest. And so all those things, those blocks are blocks and the kind of snowball of momentum that people buy into to get you to where we are today.
Very, very good.
I got one more thing. You got to have an architect that's willing to have a 7 a.m. design charrette, right? It
might have been 6:30.
6:30 a.m. We're busy people. We need to meet when we need to meet.
That's right. We had the coffee ready.
Very fair. Well, very good, guys. Thank you very much for doing this. We can pause there and open it up to questions if Dana and Kara are good with that. I'll stop my screen here. And let's see. Keep looking. Okay, hold tight here.
We're just not seeing the slides.
So as I recall, questions can be asked in I believe there's an open Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen for anybody listening.
Yeah, Drew, I have a question. Yeah, go ahead.
So this one is directed to John. How has a multi-phase approach to facility development enhanced Wake Forest administration, coaches, and student athletes experience? And then the second part to that is, can you also speak to your success in the ACC?
Sure. So the multi-phased approach, from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, the multi-phase approach has enabled us to pay as we go, essentially. We're really fortunate. Most of these on-campus facilities have very little long-term capital debt. And I also believe that in some places, if you show up and say, hey, we're going to build $150 million of athletic facilities or $200 million of athletic facilities, when you haven't done anything, you may have a credibility gap on the front end. And you may also have some people that say, whoa, wait a second, I'm not sure we want that, right? And so I think it served us well in both of those places. We've been able to do things fiscally responsibly and have success build upon success. From a programmatic standpoint, again, I'm really lucky to be here at this moment in time in Wake Forest history. This year, so we have 13 head coaches and 9 of them were in the NCAAs, and they all advanced in the NCAA. So in those programs, so really across the board, we won 2 ACC golf championships. We had the best football, second best, the tied for the most wins ever in football at 11-3. And of course, men's basketball had the biggest turnaround in ACC history, winning 25 games, and our head coach was coach of the year. So those things are all significant, and certainly now the people inside the buildings is still the most important thing, as our coaches always speak of, right? But having great facilities provides great confidence for coaches, just like great lab and teachers and professors and doctors and scientists. They want to have world-class lab equipment, like we have across at Wake Forest, at Atrium Baptist Health, and at Wake Downtown.
Looks like I got another one. John, this one's, what facilities do you see having the biggest impact on student athlete experience, or which facilities have had? You could say either.
Well, certainly from the academic facility that we have is something that is used every day. And that's why now that was really the first facility for Wake Forest 20 years ago in this quadrant. And now it's time to upgrade it and reinvigorate it and totally rebuild it essentially. Then the indoor practice facility, the McCray Fieldhouse, for Wake Forest is a really, and really any of the athletics professionals that are on this screen, that indoor space for student athletes, they love it's exciting and invigorating to be there, and it sends a statement, and then it's doggone practical regardless of what team it is and when it is, when they can get out of a thunderstorm or get out of a sleet storm or whatever and be inside and practice and be effective.
We've got one. Let's see. How do you balance multiple programs' needs and create facilities that are cross-sport functional? That's a good one.
Yeah, so I think we got a lot of mileage out of some of the programs. The nutrition area on the second floor, Sutton Sports Performance, for example, that serves all athletes. It was no accident that it was placed right there, kind of at the core. There's a number of other things. I mean, there's some sports-specific weight rooms and things like that. But at the end of the day, the south wall of Sutton Sports Performance Center is wide open to McCray Fieldhouse, so that all athletes can benefit from that indoor facility. And so there's kind of this center corridor that comes from McCray Fieldhouse all the way up to the Miller Center. And so all of the athletes can kind of feed to that indoor center. And so that's just a couple of ways we tried to cross-pollinate the programs.
Yeah, Drew, that's a tricky question because there is a dynamic of it's only one sport and it's dedicated to that one sport and that makes it better, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say we got a pretty good blend of that because there's also a functionality. You can have a 20,000 square foot or 30,000 square foot weight room that all the teams use, but that might not be as functional as having, two large spaces, or in our case, we've got 3 spaces. They're right next to each other, which does provide the ability for the football strength staff, the Olympic strength staff, and the basketball strength staff to have professional, what I like to say, they can all sit around the same water cooler and talk about different cases and trade ideas. From a safety standpoint, they can also cover each other, or if an accident happens, there's help close by. But then the lifts are different. Right? The lifts are different and the exercises are different and the cadence of when they happen and the music, you name it, is different. And so for us, we've got the best of all worlds, including with what I believe, I haven't seen anything like the basketball strength facility for men's and women's basketball in the Shaw Complex, which really is the ultimate element of that facility, which also ties into what Wake Forest has historically done. In most of our sports at Wake Forest, we've developed, we've recruited, we've out-evaluated and out-recruited and then out-developed people to have late-term student athletes that win championships in their juniors and senior years.
Yeah.
I would say, sorry, go ahead, Jeremy.
I was going to add, I think in the early research that we had done and the interviews that we did with student athletes, the culture here is that all the student athletes are part of this bigger program together. And so having them all working out in the same building, seeing each other, walk through the halls. I think it's part of that sort of winning mentality that goes and connects all programs together. And just the campus here has that culture.
That is exactly what I was going to note, that these facilities, you get to see each other's facilities, and that's not typical, right? Generally speaking, student athletes, they are pretty separate, or at least, somewhat separate. So in this case, that connectivity, I think, plays a huge role.
That connectivity, Drew, also drives performance, right? And so in the sport we recently changed, we changed coaches in women's basketball, and our women's basketball student athletes told me they didn't like walking around. They didn't like walking around not being a winning program, right? So walking around and seeing other champions, whether it's a great 1,500 meter runner or a football athlete or a world-class golfer, et cetera.
Yeah, and we didn't touch on sports medicine, but that's another program that is in the lower level of the Miller Center that all the athletes have immediate access. So under one roof, they're getting their nutrition, their sports medicine, and academics, as well as their training.
Love it. Let's see, for John, how do you approach fundraising for new facilities and campaigns during times of economic uncertainty like we're seeing now?
The best time there is. Hard times is the best time to build relationships. And certainly timing is always, you can't be obtuse about knowing that there's pressure on people. But, last year, fiscal year 21, which was a pandemic and was extreme duress, that was the greatest year of athletic fundraising in Wake Forest history. We raised $37 million. That included a $10 million cash gift as part of a $20 million pledge from Bob and Currie. We didn't stop working because of the pandemic. Just like we're not going to stop working because I'm not going to look at it today because I want to retire someday and I want to be depressed. But wherever it is today, it may be down, it may be up, it may be down or up tomorrow, but the fundamentals of a relationship building never stop. And when times are hard, that's the best time to be in touch with people, in my opinion, and build real relationships and authentic relationships that lead to understanding what's important and what drives your donors and what they're interested in, to be in a position when the right time comes to propose a partnership.
Jeremy, we have one for you, which was how is that your research effort? What data points were you actually gathering to actually drive design, to inform your design or your planning?
Well, we went through a lengthy process of a couple days worth of interviews with student athletes, with administrators, just people throughout the athletic department. Our main driver was to just focus on, what does it mean to be a student athlete at Wake Forest, and pulling that information from them. What is it like being, playing here, being a part of this family, being a part of this culture? Because we wanted to represent that in the facilities themselves. And so it was a lot of asking questions. Why did you choose to come here? What was the biggest reason? What was the driver? A lot of those had to do with coaches and with staff, which was what we kind of expected. But there was other things that were unique to Wake Forest. The size of the campus and the school, the family sort of mentality, the fact that they're very involved with not just the athletic students only, but they're in with the general population as well, and where they live and hang out. And so there's just a lot of unique things that Wake Forest had that came to the surface that we wanted to represent in the design.
I've got one that is, have any specific aspects to these individual projects on your campus been more beneficial to your student athletes and or coaches than maybe you even predicted? Something you find yourself maybe talking about more than you would have ever guessed?
I'm guessing maybe proximity to campus. I mean, what I hear a lot from coaching staff and others is the fact that these new facilities on campus have given the athlete the ability to train more often and more effectively because they've got to be at class in 30 minutes. Let me slide something in here. That was a little tougher to do when they had to go off campus or wherever they might be going.
I think the sense of pride that comes with having great spaces is something but then when you see your student athletes and how they appreciate it and how it gives a place to be part of. So you take those two men's and women's basketball clubhouses per se. We all know really across the country we're all working really hard to help our students and our student athletes connect better and develop team cultures, develop team identities, and providing spaces that students want to be in they want to be hang out with the coaches in the office because they got a great setting, and they want to be in the players' lounge with their teammates because it's a nice place to be and just be together. And those are really important elements of team culture, team chemistry, and team cohesiveness.
The next one I've got is as an athletic director or as an athletic department, how do you go about deciding to update old facilities? I think using space you already have is key, but where does that start? How do you get that conversation going with the whole department and university?
Specifically with existing facilities?
Yeah, I think that's the intent.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, having been part of a lot of different projects, some of which are, massive renovations and enrichments and enhancements of facilities, and some of which were tear it down and build it back up. I think that's a really important question to ask, because I have seen some projects where they really should have torn it down and built it back rather than trying to do it. And in our case, the locker room element of this original project, as the whole thing progressed, we made a decision in 2019 and 20 that we were not going to do it where it was planned to be done, which was in an old building. And what we're going to end up with is going to be more expensive, but it's going to be so much nicer. And comparatively, it's a much better and much long-term sustainable investment. I think we also have to be really realistic about there are some things that we're not going to be able to do. And we've got to be, as an administrator and as an athletics director with your coaches, setting an expectation of, hey, and really the expectation starts with the question, Coach, what's the most important part of this building, right? And so going back to 2014, Coach Clausen, what's the most important part of improving our football facilities? And right away, it was about that indoor field, which they also used on one end of it as the weight room for about 4 years. So what's really the most important thing? And now let's build a game plan to get the most important things.
And I think as we were looking at earlier options for where a football locker room would go, getting constructability feedback, different delivery methods, which we haven't talked about a lot here, but there were CM at risk involved on some of these things. And so, with the renovation of existing facilities, you're often talking about, well, how much more service life can I squeeze out of this facility versus a ground up facility is generally a 50-year building, right? I mean, so I think those are the things you have to wrestle with.
How did you prioritize the projects in your master plan? How did you sell it to your off-campus community?
Well, for Wake Forest, the most recent projects like the McCray football complex expansion or the new building, the 60,000 square foot building, that was really prioritized in terms of the right next step. And rather than try to go, I mean, we have a Coliseum, Joe Coliseum, that was built in 1989, which still continues to be a wonderful Coliseum. And there had been talk about renovating the Coliseum and different things. But as we all know, when you have a 32-year-old arena that was built pre-ADA, you're probably not going to do anything that's really constructive and impactful to that building that's not like multiple 8 digits, right? And so for us, the focus was let's first focus on finishing this campus quadrant, this fourth quarter drive, as we like to call it, to finish our campus stuff, and then we'll pivot back to some of the other projects.
Outside of trips to see examples of other facilities, how did you include donors in the planning process to get buy-in?
Well, I've done different things at different times. I've taken them down to the architect's office in Kansas City or down here in Winston-Salem or whatever, and had them participate in the process. And some donors really love that. Let me back up and say, every donor I've ever had do that thinks it's the greatest thing in the world and loves being part of the process and understanding. It's also a way to bring other voices into the conversation that might help better manage expectations, let's say. What if we had a tunnel going into this? Well, we can do the tunnel, but it's going to be an extra $30 million. Do we want to spend $30 million there? Or do we want to spend $30 million here? And so me as a athletics practitioner, I don't have necessarily the full authority of an architect or a contractor or whatever to be able to explain some of that stuff to donors. So that might help with the expectation management aspect of it.
Yeah, we've done throughout the design process, we've had separate meetings with donors. We've had several sort of walkthroughs where we might fly through the 3D model with them just to focus on things, to help them feel comfortable with the vision and what's going on, to keep them up to date. We've also set up virtual portals where they have access to kind of the latest and greatest that's happening, so that they can jump in and see what's going on their own time, and we don't have to have those meetings. So we can flex and help support donors in a lot of different ways.
Drew, I'd also say that when you're working with donors who can become your lead donors, it's okay not to go in the first time and have a side stitch full color brochure, right? I feel like the more rustic what you're presenting, or what, even like the old napkins at a restaurant, pulling out the napkin and start drawing after you've had a big win or something like that, and start drawing. What if we did this here, and what if we did that there? That's just as effective in my experience in developing the build up to the excitement to making a transformational investment in a project. I also believe that lead donors understand that an investment in an athletic facility project is not just an investment in that project. It's an investment in economic development in that community. If we look at the $38 million from the Currie complex, like 85% of it came from outside of Forsyth County. Now, we got 250,000 people in our city, and there's 1.8 million people within 30 minutes of Joel Coliseum and Truist Field. But a bunch of that money didn't come from around here. It came from other places back into this area. And so, recognizing donors who have the ability to make 8-figure gifts and are more prone to make gifts like that, recognize that this investment is a lot more than just, our team winning. Although that's really important too.
Ken, do you want to add anything to that on the donor side?
I guess technology allows us to involve donors in a way that, maybe we haven't been able to before with, VR goggles and that kind of thing. I think on all of these projects, there was ongoing discussions with DI of how do we do this brand strategy in a way that allows us to not be stagnant. And I think the donors embraced that idea that, we've used a lot of monitors. We've got touch screens and some of these things. And so the ability for these facilities to be updatable and not get dated very quickly was something I think that donors embraced, and a lot through the presentations that we and DI made to the donors.
I will say the NBA wall we showed in the men's basketball space, Jeremy mentioned, is a pretty good example of donor insight thoughts, which was the push was to create an NBA wall like no one had, right? NBA walls often, kind of all look the same. And that's where those, the gold, half balls, all that design comes from. It was really different by donor. How closely do you work with other university leaders, and how much have they been involved when prioritizing facilities and going through the whole planning vision process?
I assume that question is for me, Drew.
I would say, yeah. I mean, I think Ken probably has some insight as well, but yeah, really, how did you engage campus? How has campus been engaged in this?
Well, all of the projects we've done in my career at 3 different institutions have all been very intertwined with our presidents and our boards and our campus leaders. Ultimately, at Wake Forest, we don't even like to use the term athletic department. We just say Wake Forest Athletics, right? We're part of Wake Forest University. And when you look at the overhead shot of our campus, anybody that thinks Wake Forest athletics aren't important to Wake Forest University overall just doesn't understand real estate, because we got a bunch of the best real estate here that's devoted to intercollegiate athletics. And so that comes with the responsibility to be cognizant of the other projects and other elements of our campus and how they're and then other timings, right? And you can be belly aching about how your coach office isn't very big, or somebody doesn't have is sitting 2 to a cubicle, and then if you have faculty members who are hearing that, who have no air conditioning in their space or whatever it may be, I can be really decisive really fast. So we've got to be empathetic. Then we also have this opportunity. We operate with this tremendous sense of urgency in college athletics, right? And sometimes what we can use our urgency to help drive gifts in other areas of the university. And when we collaborate with our institutional development leaders or our university foundation, our university president or whatever, and better yet, if we have our president in a position to make the ask and win the ask, that's a great win for the entire university. And so, an example of that was, for me, was our basketball practice facility at K-State in 2010 or 11. When we got the lead gift for that, we got a $6 million gift. $2 million was for the practice facility. $4 million was from an engineering endowment. And the engineering endowment wasn't as timely, but we had to have the pledge card signed for that $2 million gift towards that practice facility. Because we had to have that gift, we got the other one. So we delivered a $6 million gift. $4 million for the university, $2 million for the athletics facility, and the same thing with the Veneer complex, which was a $60 million gift. $20 million for the Veneer football complex, $40 million for other academic needs, and that really helps to help you be a good partner.
I think I'm going to get in trouble. I think we're supposed to stop. There's a couple other good questions out there. Please forgive us for not getting to them, but I think Kara's going to get mad at me if I don't stop the meeting. So final statement, again, a huge thank you to the three of you for participating in this. Huge thank you, John, Ken, again, for involving us, for letting us be a part of this. Hopefully everyone was able to learn a little bit more about what's happening at Wake Forest. And, I think you're going to see even better, cooler, greater images here in the very near future as all of these really come to life. So panelists, feel free if you have anything you'd like to say, but otherwise a huge thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.